Welcome in, everybody, to another episode on this fine Tuesday evening of the Fantasy Cheat Sheet on the Going for Two Live Network, hosted by Going for Two. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the YouTube channel. Tonight, I am Mike, drop the Mike FF on Twitter, and we got with us Zach at the Big Pulowski. How you doing tonight, Zach?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks. A little sad about my Bucks, but I'm excited to talk some fantasy football. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good, and I'm ready to talk about this draft that we had over the weekend.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
Yeah, for sure. So, all the news on this week's show revolves around the NFL draft. Let's start with a history-making top of the draft. There were 5 defensive players in a row. First time since 1991. At number 1, we had Trayvon Walker. At 2, Aiden Hutchinson to Detroit. Then we had at 3, you had Stingley to Houston Texans, Ahmad Sauce Gardner to the Jets, and then at 5, Kayvon Thibodeau, who at one point people thought could be the number 1 or number 2 pick in the draft, ended up at 5 going to the Giants. What was crazy was the first skill position wasn't taken until the 8th spot, going to the Falcons. Drake London, the wide receiver out of USC, and the first quarterback was taken at number 20 to the Steelers. What did you think, Zach, about the top 5?
The top 5, a little out of order. Still surprised with the Jags pick. I've been reading a lot, trying to understand what they were thinking with that pick, and it makes a little bit more sense. You know, if that's their guy, you got to do it. There's not a clear number 1 this year, so you can't really blame them for having the worst record in a year where there's no like Bryce Young or guys like that you really want to snag at 101. But overall, there's a lot of great defensive guys. We saw, what was it, 6 Georgia guys in the first as well.
Yep.
I mean, there. I was just impressed overall with this draft. It didn't really feel like a lot of teams did poor. I mean, it's weird exiting the draft and feeling that way.
We'll get to one of those in a little bit because I do think one did bad, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The biggest thing to me in the first round of the draft, there were 9 trades made in the first round. A bunch of them were to move up and get the wide receivers. I'm just going to read off the wide receivers that were taken in the first round real quick for the people listening. Drake London, Atlanta at 8. Garrett Wilson to the Jets at 10. Chris Olave to the Saints at 11. Jameson Williams to Detroit at 12, which was very interesting to me. Jahan Dotson to Washington at 16. And Treylon Burks to Tennessee at 18 for a certain reason that we'll get to in a second, Zach. But overall, what do you think about the 6 wide receivers that were taken in the first round?
I mean, those were the top 6. You know, there was a clear tier from everything I had read or heard in reports and articles prior to the draft. Sounds like every team was looking at this wide receiver group as there's this 6, there's another tier of solid guys, not quite as high upside, and then everyone else. So not surprised to see those 6 in the first round. However, little disappointed as a Packer fan, if I must say so myself. I was hoping one would fall, but I can get into that later.
Yep, as a Chiefs fan, I feel the same way, but we will definitely get into that later. So just like I said, Treylon Burks was taken by the Tennessee Titans, and here is why. There were 2 major trades involving wide receivers. First, A.J. Brown from the Tennessee Titans has been clamoring for a new contract and that he was going to hold out. He ends up on the Philadelphia Eagles with Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. And then Arizona goes and trades for Hollywood Brown from Baltimore Ravens. I do have to add that I personally believe that they probably knew about the biggest news that came out yesterday, which was DeAndre Hopkins has been suspended for 6 games for PEDs. So, to get back to those 2 trades, which one do you think, the A.J. Brown to the Eagles or the Hollywood Brown to Arizona? Which one do you like the most and why?
I don't know if there's one I like more. There's more detail that I found out about and afterwards that made made more sense for both. I was surprised by both off the bat, but I think now with the D-Hop suspension coming out, Arizona already knew this was coming, and that's why they made a move for another weapon. So in that regard, I like it a lot more. Didn't hate it off the bat, but once you find out they're going to lose D-Hop for essentially a third of the season, makes a lot more sense. Definitely a good call there. In regards to the A.J. Brown one, didn't understand that. I mean, I thought Tennessee loved him. Vrabel loved him. I really thought they were going to pay him. I was listening to the Ryan Russillo show today, and one of the guests he had on, she was talking about the fact that Tennessee didn't want to let him go. But in the end, it's my cat. I'm sorry. She's going crazy. But, no, sorry. I didn't get it. I thought they would keep him. And with that pod, what they were stating was the fact that they wanted to pay him. They offered him some money. He said no. He asked for this amount in return, and they said hell no to that.
Yep.
And then they said, all right, well, we got to get rid of him because we're not going to lose him for nothing. And I guess initially they were talking with the Jets. And the trade was actually going to fall through if the Eagles couldn't have agreed to a deal with him, but I guess they agreed to one fairly quickly, and that that trade was already agreed to prior to the draft, and it was just a matter of when it would be announced. But realistically, I like AJ Brown on Philly. I'm glad there's another weapon with him and Devonta. Don't kind of concerned about the quarterback still there, so probably have to lean Hollywood in that regard. But what about you, Mike? How do you feel about both of those trades?
I completely didn't understand the Hollywood one until yesterday. Obviously, I think they knew ahead of time. When it comes to the AJB one, he went from a team for AJ Brown himself in the fantasy wise and just in football. He went from a team that had a running game run first to a team that's a run first team. I don't think it's going to drop him that much, but this is for people that are like, oh, it's a better situation. I think it helps out Hurts more than it helps out AJB. Because obviously AJ Brown is better than any target. I know you like Devonta Smith. Not saying Devonta Smith is a bad player, but he's not AJ Brown. I'm just going to say it.
I agree. And just to jump in there real quick, That's what surprised me from a Tennessee perspective. Like, I don't know if Treylon Burks can be AJ Brown. But that's essentially what you're asking is, hey, on a cheaper deal, since we don't want to pay this guy, can you turn into that? And from a fantasy perspective, I don't see why the potential opportunity couldn't be there, but it's still high expectations. Just saying, hey, we had this guy. We kind of need you to be this guy for our team to do well.
Yeah, for sure. So now that we have gotten into that stuff, let's go straight to... Yes. So let's go to the quarterback situation real quick before we dive into the main part of our show. All I want to ask you is what I know everyone in the community was down on the quarterback class this year. I was one of them. We talked off camera. I know you were down on this class. Pickett went 20th overall. I know I'm going to get into one of his new targets in a little bit. But overall, did you really expect this draft class to fall after Pickett? Did you expect this draft class to fall as far as they did? And what do you think about the overall value of the guys towards the bottom, including Hal, Corral, etc.?
First off, I absolutely didn't think that the quarterbacks would continue to fall this far. A, I'm surprised that Pickett was the first one gone. Yep. B, I'm surprised it was Pittsburgh because realistically, I don't like Trubisky, but it made sense to use him as a bridge quarterback into next year where there's a lot more viable options in the 23 draft class. So I guess that's what I was anticipating with Pittsburgh, or maybe next year there's another unhappy veteran quarterback that they could try and lure in. With the rest of them, though, the Corral, Ritter, Malik, I love the value. I was not high on this class at all, but, getting them in the third or fourth round, the expectations are lower. The the fan bases, they're not looking at this guy like, we are depending on you to not suck. Yeah, I was looking at this draft class as a comparison to a 2013 draft class with EJ Manuel and Geno Smith.
Yep.
That was kind of my expectation, which the bar is really low if that's the standard, but it was smart of these teams to not use that draft capital on it. And I think overall, like we had already discussed, it shows teams kind of being smarter. If they're not high on these quarterbacks, even though they're QB needy, why reach? Why set that standard when you could get, a lot more viable options at other positions to help your team in the long term? What were your thoughts with this quarterback class, Mike?
Yeah, I did not think that Pickett would be the number one. I thought he possibly could be. I'm not completely shocked that Pickett was number one, but I am absolutely stunned that the rest of them fell that far as they did. I'm shocked about how I'm not saying that I'm the biggest Howell fan, but if you would have told me 3 days ago, hey, I'll bet you $100 that Howell lands in the 5th round, I would have told you you're freaking nuts. I thought Washington could have taken a quarterback, but I didn't think it was going to be that late. I thought they could have got someone in the 3rd or 4th. The one team that didn't come out with a quarterback in the draft at all, I know they signed a UDFA. I was adamant that Seattle was either going to trade up at 40, 41 up to like the top of the 2nd because they had those 2 picks. And then when they kept falling, I was adamant that they were going to take a quarterback at 41 or 40. That didn't happen. But
what's surprising too is Seattle, I thought they were sending out smoke screens when they were saying, no, we're high on Drew Lock. We believe in him. We want to give him a chance. I thought that was bull. I didn't want to hear that. We've seen enough of Drew Lock, but I guess Seattle hasn't seen enough. They're wanting to ride that. But I'm convinced, like what I was mentioning with Pittsburgh, they're trying to do that for next year. I don't see how they're really doing anything else. With that same podcast I mentioned earlier today, they were also referencing the fact that Seattle has no interest in Baker Mayfield. They don't want him anywhere near their team, which that's a whole other story. But also with
another ball game.
The Malik to Tennessee specifically, I guess that was more of because that's not necessarily a team that you think is quarterback needy. But I guess the Tennessee front office and team itself has felt as if Tannehill has gotten complacent. This was a guy that, when he came in from Miami, he was the backup to Mariota. He had to prove it if he wanted it.
Yep.
And they don't feel like that's there anymore, which, was evident in that final game against the Bengals.
Did you hear his quote today?
Oh, what was that? Oh, it was a dark place?
He said he was in a dark place, but then they asked him about Malik, and he said it's not his job to mentor Malik, but if Malik learns from me, good for him.
I get it to a point. Not every quarterback is.
No, I get it.
Like Aaron Rodgers said the same thing about Jordan Love, but he loves J-Lo. They're homies. Like they're actually friends. So
of course you would say that.
No, but they actually do like each other. Like obviously Aaron had the same response, but like you would expect the Brett Favre treatment from him that he received when he was selected, but he actually had a good relationship. I think Tannehill, I think a lot more expectations were on him last year to improve, and it wasn't there. So, I don't hate these picks. 3rd, 4th round, get those guys. I like it. Bailey Zappi, that's the only one I don't understand.
Yeah, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. So what we're going to do tonight is we are going to talk about all 3 positions but the quarterback. We're going to talk in general about the position, and then each of us is going to give a take on a certain player. So to start off the evening, boom, wide receiver talk. So we talked about the top 6 that were taken in the 1st round. You have your guy that you're going to talk about. I'm going to have my guy we're going to talk about. So let's try not to give those 2 away yet. But what did you think overall about the draft class and what happened? And then we'll go from there.
Well, Mike, first off, I know we talked about this a little bit pre-show, but this class, it didn't have the highest ceiling, the biggest name, sexiest targets at the top, like a 2021 class with Pitts and Chase and all these other guys. But with this one, well, the ceiling isn't necessarily as high for the people at the top. The floor is a lot higher later into the draft. There's more guys with, I think, a serviceable uh, level of talent where they can have longer careers. I'm not saying a 20-year, Hall
Yeah.
of Famer, but there's a lot of guys that could have value stashing right now where down the road that might be a tight end one or a running back two that's getting used often, a wide receiver three on a good team that throws the ball a lot. Not not as many guys that are just going to be tossed away in a year or two when the next class comes in. So I like the depth of this class, and specifically with the wide receivers. I mean, guys like Calvin Austin or like one that surprised me was Justin Ross. I didn't realize that teams were so scared of that spinal fusion, but I did like that he got picked up by the Chiefs and they said he cleared the medical. I
Yeah.
think,
So what I saw about Justin Ross is I saw that 10 teams literally scratched him off the draft board before the draft even started. So he only had 22 teams to be drafted by because 10 teams flat
yeah,
out said that he was bye, not on the board. I disagree. I mean, you got to give the kid the one thing, being a Chiefs fan, the one thing I will say is I'm glad we picked him up. I'm glad we picked him up being a Chiefs fan, but I'm also glad that the kid's getting a shot.
yeah,
I
the
heard
talent's
him.
there.
Yeah, the talent's there. We heard, I mean, I know you did. We all heard that he could have been a second, third round pick, and he doesn't even get drafted. Contractually and just football wise, no guaranteed money. There's no risk. If something happens and he gets re injured or he just doesn't pan out, the Chiefs can cut him, no loose strings.
Yeah.
But with Tyreek leaving and other talent coming in, he can still, if he succeeds, then it's just a bonus, which leads me real quick to talk about one guy, Skye Moore. I am kind of surprised that we drafted Skye Moore, not because I didn't think the Chiefs would draft him. I am absolutely shocked that he was on the board where we got him. We traded out of the 50 spot, moved back, and then New England goes and takes Tyquan Thornton in front of
Or,
Pierce.
no, I was just going to say, didn't Velas Jones go also?
Yeah, but as
But
Tyquan
yeah,
Thornton got drafted, the pick that we traded out of. Then the guy I will talk about in a little bit gets taken, Skye or Pierce, then Velas, and then Skye. He was like, I'm just surprised that he fell that far. Another wide receiver that I liked, and I know we talked about him a little bit pre-show. I know Buffalo's got a lot of wide receivers in that room, but I think Khalil Shakir is a good spot there.
and he kept falling as well.
He fell, yeah, he
Yeah.
fell majorly. I know someone that's watching right now. He's going to say, I have to mention the San Francisco 49ers taking Gray out of SMU towards the end.
Was that the end of the third? Right? Wasn't that the final
Uh,
pick? I think that was the final pick of day two. Because
Day
I
two would
was
be
I was
Danny Gray.
surprised that that was the wide. Similar to what you were just mentioning, I was just surprised he was the next one taken when Shakir was available and a few other guys were there. I mean, I didn't hate the pick, but I also just thought there's a couple of guys I liked more ahead of him.
Told you. I knew I would get that. Were you surprised that Dallas took Jalen Tolbert?
I was surprised. I mean, I don't hate the fit, especially from a fantasy perspective. I think there's potential wide receiver two, wide receiver three, potential there, but I always question, I don't even question it. I had my own Mike McCarthy experience for a long, long time, and then it's the Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones combo. I never know what to expect there, but it's probably going to be something where probably wasn't the smartest decision, but they're going to do whatever their gut feels to, make it a sexy looking team, regardless of its function.
Yeah, so that was the wide receiver talk overall. Now we're going to get into our guys, either good, bad, however we want to discuss these players. Zach, why don't you start us off with your guy at wide receiver?
I have talked about him on a few shows already. I will be standing on mountaintops all over the world for the next 20 years while he's on the Green Bay Packers, screaming his name, saying how he's going to be so great and is great. His name is Christian Watson. I was thrilled with this pick. I wanted him in the first round, especially once those first 6 went. I was like, all right, let's just get Christian now. I don't know if the Chiefs the Chiefs are 29, right?
We were at 29 and 30, and when we
Yep,
traded up to
'cause
21, I thought that was the pick.
I was so scared. And then we didn't take a wide receiver, and I was like, okay, like I'm not upset about it. If there's other guys they like going into round 2 or with the 28th pick, so be it. And 28th, still wasn't there. I thought there was a little overreaction day 1 about how Green Bay didn't take a wide receiver. I'm like, okay, we have 6 rounds left. Obviously, I don't want them all to be 6th, 7th rounders and UDFAs, but they have plenty of time to address it. And then I was thinking maybe a Skye Moore or a David Bell, Alec Pierce, someone like that would be available with Green Bay's first, second rounder, because I figured Christian Watson was going in those first 10 picks of day 2. And next thing you know, it's pick 2 of the second round. Green Bay is getting aggressive, trading both of their second rounders, and with the Vikings of all teams. And we got my boy Christian, 6'4", 210 pounds. Yeah, I know he went to North Dakota State, so the competition level really isn't there. If you look at his stat lines, it's nothing amazing, but the one stat I would like to point out from his college career is the amount of yards per reception. Though it was almost 20 yards per reception in college. He didn't have a lot of receptions, but it's a run-first offense. The usage wasn't there. And also, he won 4 championships in 5 years, so he knows a thing or two about winning. But it's all, I get it, it's FCS, all
Yep.
that. But he is fast. He is able, 10% drop rate. Okay, that's fine. He can drop. That's fine. Is it going to go up or down with more volume? We don't know. But also, that's something you can work on. And that's what I like about this pick is the upside. This is a guy that I look at where the only issues he has, or the only things preventing him from being a really great wide receiver, are his drop rate and his route tree. Those are things that can be improved. He has hand strength overall. He has the vertical ability with the speed. He has the jump ball ability. He's very smart. He's got the work ethic. And like from every interview I've watched, he sounds like a great team player, whether it's run blocking or doing special teams. The guy just wants to be out there helping the team and winning. And if he's got that mentality, I think there's enough guys around him, someone like Randall Cobb. I don't know how much I want Sammy Watkins trying to advise him on anything, but
You don't, trust me, as a Chiefs fan, you don't. He's only good He's only good from week 1 and 2.
Okay, good. At least I can have high hopes for week 1 and 2, so that's good to know. But wait, he said DW about his. Don't worry, yeah, just wasn't in a good scheme. Yeah, and I get he wasn't in a good scheme for the wide receivers, but also, the route tree, even if it was a good scheme for wide receivers, that's something that can be developed with the right system, with the right coaches around them. And I think, also what I like about some of these wide receivers, I'm sure you'll feel the same way with Skye Moore, you have a veteran quarterback that is known to kind of be on the ass of their wide receivers when they do something stupid or do the wrong route or make a mistake. And in that regard, if they have the right head on their shoulders and Aaron's laying into them on the sideline like, hey, what the hell was that? They're going to work on it. They're going to correct it. So I'm really excited about the Christian Watson pick. I think that, I'm getting really aggressive taking him in Dynasty rookie drafts right now. I'm getting dangerous with it.
You are. Well, what we talked about, you are. But yeah,
I don't think it'll fail. 7 out of 8 leagues. I wish I could make it all 8, but I feel optimistic that it won't treat me wrong. And so, Mike, who is your guy?
So, real quick, I love the Christian Watson take. I love Christian Watson. I thought we maybe could get him at that end of the round 1 area, but I get why we didn't. We needed the help in other positions. I understand it. My guy is the one that I am upset that we did not get because we traded out of the 50 spot to New England. Like I mentioned, they got Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor. We only dropped 5 or 6 spots. I was like, okay, maybe this guy's going to be there. He got taken, and that is the George Pickens out of University of Georgia. I like the big type of receivers. It's just my kind of, I like the big guy. I liked Nico Collins last year. It was George Pickens was my guy this year. I personally believe that and Jameson Williams, you can say the same thing. But if he wasn't hurt earlier in his career and he was able to play this whole season, I think we could be talking about George Pickens as the number 1 or number 2 receiver off the board this year, in between, Garrett Wilson and Olave, or even London and Wilson. I do think Pickens has that talent. He led the team in receiving as a freshman, and that's Georgia, who we all know, if you pay attention to college football, does not throw the ball a lot. They are more known for their stable of running backs. I could list probably 8 running backs that have been in the league or are in the league now that are studs that went to Georgia. He has good hands. He is a strong-bodied receiver with a super large catch radius. He's going to go up and get the ball. He's going to be a complimentary piece in Pittsburgh for now. I'm going to get to that for now take in a little bit. I think he's after, they lost Juju to the Chiefs. Yes, they lost their 4th wide receiver, Ray McLeod. They got Calvin Austin Jr. to play that role. I think that they're going to move Deontay Johnson around a little bit. You can put Claypool on one side. You can put George Pickens on the other side. In a couple years, we're probably going to have the Pickett to Pickens show. That's going to be annoying to hear. I will admit that. But here's the reason that I like this for Pittsburgh. Deontay Johnson is in a contract year. Not too far off is Claypool. I think that Deontay Johnson is the wide receiver that stays. I think Claypool is eventually going to be gone because the Steelers don't always pay their wide receivers. We've seen Plaxico Burress. We've seen Mike Wallace, who went to Miami, got a giant contract, got a bag of cash, and that bag of cash is still sitting on the beach. I mean, the talent, the play is still sitting on the beach, but the cash that he checked he deposited the bank. So I don't think that the Steelers are going to go ahead and pay both Claypool and Johnson. Body type, play type, I think they're going to keep Deontay Johnson, possession kind of guy. The Steelers have not liked some of Claypool's antics on the field, off the field, whatever. He got in that little scrum at the end of the year, dancing around when he should have given the ball to the ref to kneel the ball down. So one of the reasons I like Pickens is I personally believe that he will be their number 2 receiver in 2 to 3 years. And in Dynasty, that's a perfect spot. I've seen him going at between 110 and 202. I'm in a rookie draft that started yesterday, and I had the 201 and the 202, and he went at 112. I was not happy, but I get it. So, Zach, what do you think about George Pickens real quick before we jump on?
I like George. I do kind of like the idea though of Skye Moore better. I was higher on Skye Moore pre-draft than I was George Pickens. I mean, I like both. You can't really go wrong with either of them. I get what you're saying, but I really do agree with the Pittsburgh keeping Deontay Johnson and parting ways with Claypool down the road. Because Claypool, Mapletron, the former nickname before he hasn't really lived up to the hype. But I mean, he's a big-bodied guy, a jump ball guy. And if anything, this is the guy that can fill that hole. I don't Obviously Deontay Johnson's a completely different style of receiver, but that's where I think Deontay Johnson lined up alongside of him and Pickens are going to be in a great slot side by side, and pretty much an upgraded version of Mapletron. Uh, you know, I think the expectations were a lot higher for Claypool for a while, but you know, it still can happen. But at the same time, I feel like we've kind of been really expecting more for a while. He had the big few weeks, rookie year, and now he's been kind of hot and cold since. So I completely agree with what you're saying in regards to Pickens and Deontay Johnson being the duo.
So, do you have any closing thoughts on wide receivers before we move on to another position, or are we ready to roll?
I think we're good to go. I mean, other than that, yeah, like some maybe some sleepers I like. I'm watching the UDFA's. I think people need to keep an eye out in the waiver area right now. If you're in a dynasty league, there are some UDFA guys that have recently found teams, and if you have deep benches, maybe stash a couple of them. Maybe just put them on your watch list. Try and watch on the like your Twitter search, see if there's any news, any reports coming out of camps about this guy really impressing, because you don't know. Maybe it's a someone I really like pre-draft was Dontario Drummond, someone like that where I believe he went to Dallas, and if that's the case, maybe he can be that wide receiver four. If they're in a pass-heavy offense, that could be some big weeks. So all I think just I'm good with leaving it there, but I just wanted to emphasize keep your eye out for some of those UDFA's at the wide receiver position because I think there might be some hidden gems there.
Definitely, for sure. So we're going to move on to the next position, and that is the good old running backs. So obviously, the number one, the biggest thing, top one and two. Number one was Brees Hall. He went to the Jets. Number two was Kenneth Walker. I do want to mention the biggest slide guy before I throw it to you. I was shocked that Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M fell all the way down to where he did. He did go to the Chargers. There's people that don't think it's a good landing spot. I think it's a great landing spot. I don't, because the reason I think it's a good landing spot, Eckler is not a three down, 200, 250, 300 carry kind of back. He needs someone behind him. And let's be real, Roundtree and Kelly and them and Justin Jackson aren't cutting it. So for the Chargers, for them to get him where they were able to get him, it was a steal. What do you think about him and the rest of the running back class before we get into our guys that we want to talk about?
I don't have too much in regards to good stuff to say about Spiller. I'm not as high as some are. A lot of that pre-draft stuff kind of turned me off. I think we kind of saw everything that we thought, and then I don't love it, not from a standpoint of the opportunity couldn't be there, but we have seen the Chargers take, it was Roundtree last year, and I believe Kelly the year before in
Yep,
a similar
Kelly. Yeah.
in a similar round, similar high hopes. Ooh, that could be a good fit. Them and Eckler. Ooh, what's that going to look like? You know, wasn't Eckler a UDFA? Because I know he went to Western State in Colorado. So I know he went to a small school. So I don't know if he was drafted at all or maybe a late round. But I don't trust the Chargers when it comes to drafting running backs at this point. Because you know, every time I think I see something that where there might be potential in that regard, I end up being left a little disappointed. I thought Roundtree last year was going to be the same thing, where I wasn't necessarily that high on them, but I'm like, oh, Eckler, like that could be a good opportunity. And I guess with my thoughts on Spiller, it's less so about him and where I felt about him pre-draft, and more so being turned off because a little bit of concern for me mixed with the Chargers drafting him just was a big red flag in my eyes. And with the rest of the running back class, though, I think we saw, similar to the quarterbacks, there were a lot of running backs that just continued to fall. They weren't being too aggressive, trying to take them too early. They were filling other needs on their rosters. And there were a lot of guys I was surprised to see fall. Some weird locations like Pierre Strong Jr. I was really hoping he'd go somewhere else. I don't really love him. I mean, I could see a James White role for him there, but I didn't love that as someone that thought he could be a productive back somewhere. Uh, you've got James Cook. I see some people loving it. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but I see him as a 1 or 2 down back. I know you mentioned you just drafted him, so for your sake, I'll say LaDainian Tomlinson 2.0. But
I don't. So I don't. It's not that I thought he was like, he's not like my number 3 or 4 or whatever.
yeah,
But I think he can be. I think he's going to end up pushing Zach Moss out, and I think he could be more of what we want him to be, more than what we like. I think he'll be good, and I think he could spell Singletary, injuries and stuff like that. I think he could be that type like Madison is, where like he's a good spell, like he's an okay guy and he can do stuff, but he's also that guy that you can count on. I think you can count on him if there's an injury or whatever the case may be, because running backs will get dinged up.
And the opportunity will be there. I mean, the Buffalo Bills weren't too aggressive in regards to getting another wide receiver. Yeah, they got Khalil Shakir, but they got him later on. They weren't too aggressive, and that means it's Stephon Diggs. It's Jamison Crowder is there now? I believe.
Jamison Crowder,
Gabriel
Stephon
Davis.
Diggs, Gabriel Davis, and Isaiah McKenzie, and that's it.
Yeah. And I have a hard time seeing Isaiah McKenzie being higher than Shakir right off the bat.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't know how high of an upside some of those targets are, though. Yeah, you have Dawson Knox, but that's where I look at someone like James Cook. Not terrible. There's not a lot of running backs that really got great fits where you feel like you can get a productive running back that can provide a RB1, RB2, or maybe a flex production that week. And that's kind of the disappointing part with this class. There's a lot of running backs where it's kind of curious to see, where could he go? Maybe he could give some competition for the job, push, maybe they already have 2 respectable running backs, but that guy pushes into the RB2 slot and can creep his way into some reps. But most of them, it's a crowded room where they're going to be working hard to get any sort of opportunity. I like the Tyler Gerson. I'm sorry, you already missed the Christian Watson talk, but you can just DM me on Twitter because I'm always ready for more. But in regards to the running back, so Brian Robinson was one I was curious about. I'm not necessarily high on Antonio Gibson to begin with. I know some people think this is going to be his big year.
I'm an Antonio truther until the draft happened and they got Brian Robinson.
And that's pretty much what I was. For me, it validated my feelings about Antonio when they used a 3rd rounder on Brian, because at that point, I didn't think they'd use that draft equity to get a running back if they were that content with what Antonio was providing. I am sad to see it for my Jarrett Patterson, UDFA hype train that I was on last year. I think I can say bye to
that too. I was on that too.
I signed him in every league post draft and was just heartbroken at this draft pick. But no, there's some definitely sneaky running backs where, depending on the opportunity, if the opportunity is there, they could do some damage, but I just wouldn't expect a whole hell of a lot. Like Chianti Ingram is one, with James Conner being prone to injury. That's one I'm monitoring closely. Maybe Isaiah Pacheco can do something for you guys, because you don't really have any running backs besides Rojo.
Hey, so I got one that I want to bring up real quick, purely because our boy is watching us right now, or what? Gerson, good old Gerson, and that is the Raiders don't take the 5th-year option on Justin Jacobs, and then they go and draft 2 running backs. First, they get White. Then they go and get Bolden out of UCLA. I think that McDaniels is overthinking it, and he's trying to repeat New England's backfield 2.0 of getting just a bunch of running backs, because White is pretty much Kenyon Drake 2.0. And I think it's not a recipe for success. Not saying that White's not a good player, because I like White, but when you already have Drake, you already have Jacobs. To me, that just means Jacobs is probably gone. You mentioned Chianti Ingram. I also like the landing spot. I know they still have J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, but when you can get a guy that led the SEC, Tyler Beatty, I think he's going to take some of the passing down work. He's not going to be he's not a first, second down guy. He's going to be a passing catcher. But if you can get him late in a rookie draft, he's the guy that I would take a flyer on. We mentioned that New England. I just want to touch on that real quick, like I know you did, but that drove me nuts because I like Pierre Strong. Biggest thing to me is I'm a Ramondre fan.
Same.
And for them to go and get Pierre Strong and then to go get the second running back, it absolutely threw me for a loop. But let's get back to our guys. And I know you have someone that you want to talk about. Why don't you start it off, Zach?
This is it's an interesting pick. Tennessee Titans, Hassan Haskins. It reminds me of what they did with Malik Willis, where there might not be much going on this year, but it might be them trying to plan ahead. Well, Malik Willis is not NFL ready necessarily, and maybe they're trying to develop him for down the road, or maybe he never develops if you're low on the QB class like me. But I look at Hassan Haskins the same way, where maybe sitting behind Derrick Henry as he's aging and going off the sunny trails, fading into the distance. He's getting banged up, he's getting hurt, he's getting old. He's had a ridiculous workload. Obviously, he still looked good before he got hurt last year, but at some point they're going to have to start planning for the next step, and that's what I think Hassan could be. He's a big physical running back. He's not necessarily the biggest burst guy with his speed or his elusiveness, but I like that he's big, he's physical, he plays a physical run style, and if he can sit behind someone like Derek and really learn some things, that's a great guy to have a similar build style to and be a physical back that you can really learn and develop behind. So I love Hassan for what he could be in the future, and that's a guy that he's not going high in rookie drafts by any means, but that's a guy I'm trying to get my hands on to monitor and see, okay, I'm not expecting much in regards to an asset this year, but can he show some promise when he does get his very limited opportunities as realistically an RB3 in hopes of being more in years to come with Tennessee? Do you have any thoughts on Hassan?
So I agree with you and I disagree with you. And here I agree with you because I like the talent and I think it could be for the future. Here's where I disagree. I think he's going to produce this year more than I think you do.
Oh, don't talk dirty to me like that.
I think that he is going to end up I think they're going to end up using him a little more in the passing game. They lost Darrington Evans. They don't really have anyone behind either one of them. I think he can learn from Derrick Henry, like you said. I don't think Henry's not going to play a full season. He's not. He's getting older. I love Derrick Henry. Don't get me wrong. I'm a King Henry fan. Yeah. I had him in SFB last year, but I think that Haskins is going to get a little more play than some people think. Maybe not as much as me and you do because we both like Haskins, and I think there was a perfect landing spot for Hassan Haskins and where they got him.
I'm glad we're on the same page there. I hope you're right in regards to the production. I've been trying to snag him at a decent slot. But
he's a guy that you would put on your taxi squad and promote if have to. I don't think I'm going to sit there and have him in a roster spot all season.
And so Hassan's my guy. Who's your guy, Mike?
So pre-draft, my top 5, I had Jerome Ford. Then the draft happens and day 2's over and he's not drafted. Then day 3 happens and his name gets called. I look up and see that it's the Cleveland Browns. I'm sorry. I am going on a rant and I don't care because I absolutely like Jerome Ford, the running back out of Cincinnati, former Alabama running back, but I absolutely despise this. They have Nick Chubb. They have Kareem Hunt. They still have Dearness Johnson. I know they use Demetric Felton. They use as a running back / wide receiver, whatever you want to call him. I still like Demetric Felton. Yes, that's because I'm a UCLA fan. But that running back room is already clogged. Chubb is the workhorse running back. Chubb, I believe, is underrated. It's not that I don't like the running back situation. It's just the room is flooded. You didn't spend major draft capital, meaning day 1 or day 2. You used 5th round draft capital on Jerome Ford in a room where it's already crowded. If something doesn't happen, knock on wood, injury-wise to someone in training camp, he's probably not going to get a lot of run. And I'll be honest, I would be surprised if I draft him, because unless I get him at the very end of a draft, his stock has fallen so much for me that this is one of my biggest disappointments of the running backs in landing spots of the entire draft.
No, I completely agree. That was a guy I was monitoring closely. There's a few Cincinnati guys that I really liked and I was keeping a close eye on. And it's just brutal to watch him go there. You know, they don't really have many wide receivers. Obviously, they got another one in the draft with David Bell, but you know, why get another running back? I don't dislike Demetric Felton. I like Dearness Johnson. Obviously, you like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They're very productive backs, and I'm looking at their contracts too. You know, Kareem Hunt, he's going to be a free agent, unrestricted free agent next year. That might be some promise there, but Nick Chubb, there's a potential out on his contract after the 2023 season, but more than likely they're going to be paying him close to $12 million through 2024. And okay, cool. There's suddenly Dearness Johnson moves up to running back 2, or Jerome Ford can compete for running back 2 in 2024. That reminds me of Tony Pollard. You know,
Yep.
People love what he can be, but this guy is still an RB2. Zeke's there. He might be better. It depends. You know, some people still believe that Tony Pollard's better than Zeke. But the thing is, Zeke's 27, Pollard's 25, and they're paying Zeke a ton of money, so they're going to give him usage, and they're not going to rotate to Pollard that much when you're paying Zeke as much as he's getting. And by the time it's actually Pollard's turn, he's already a 27, like 26, 27, 28-year-old running back, and we know the longevity of a running back's career. Obviously, that's dependent on workload, but an aging running back, you know, that's usually setting up for injuries. And that's the concerning part about someone like Jerome Ford. Because I like what I saw with him. I believe in him as being a successful running back. If you want to invest in a Tony Pollard 2 years before they're Tony Pollard, or 1 year before they're like the start of Tony Pollard,
Yep.
then go snag Jerome Ford late. But you can't have high expectations at all based off how jam-packed that running back room is.
I completely agree with that. I think we've talked enough about the running back class, because just like most positions in this class, it was top heavy and then weak after that. And landing spots do matter, people. I am saying that for the people that act like landing spots do not matter. We all know they do matter. Yes, it might not matter fully, like moving someone from 2 to 10, but they do matter.
One note on that before we jump into the next thing is, I've had people ask me like, ask why do my ranks shift based on locations? If I'm that high on a guy, they shouldn't be adjusted that much based on where they go. And I always tell them this: look, the guys that I like, they drop relatively. You know, I look at my charts where I had them before, where I had them after. You don't have a guy plummeting down 20 slots.
No,
obviously,
you have
maybe
them in tiers. You have them in tiers.
Maybe it's Justin Ross. Like, that's a little different, because clearly, like, the long-term potential of his career, you get a little bit more concerned where he could drop. but for the most part, they're only moving down a couple. If I was really high on them before, if he goes to a bad team, I'm still going to be fairly high on him. But a guy that I might have not liked as much, someone like a Ty- Ty- Tyrone, Ty- Tyrion, Tyrion,
From
Davis Price,
yeah.
Davis Price, the LSU running back. I wasn't necessarily that high on him, but Elijah Mitchell has some injury concerns. Hasty has some injury concerns, and that's someone where I'm like, oh, San Francisco. I actually like what they do when they draft running backs. Usually, interesting. I'm gonna have to bump them up a little bit. And there's always bigger risers than fallers.
By far. Yep.
Yeah.
Every year.
And that's all I wanted to say on that before we jump into the next subject.
No. So let's get into the other position we still need to talk about, and that is at tight end. So, real quick, at tight end, there's not a lot. Tight end was not a very heavy class. They didn't have one for there was no day one, anything like that tight end. There was a number one consensus that I will get to in a second. But overall, besides the two that we're going to talk about, how did you feel about the class in general?
Tight end, it's a weird and funny position because to be a top 10 fantasy producing tight end, you really don't have to be that good or be that consistent. You get 8 to 12 fantasy points in a PPR league every week at the tight end position, you're going to be there.
Yeah, you're top 6.
So the bar isn't set that high. Obviously, teams need pass blocking, run blocking for tight ends from time to time as well. So it's nice to have diverse guys that can catch, go out in routes, but also block. But, I look at this draft class. Obviously, we have one guy that's above the rest. But there were a lot of very respectable tight ends that I'm excited to see what they can be at the next level. A few that I really love the landing spots of, Greg Dulcich with Denver. I'm sorry for all you Albert O believers. Clearly he's not the answer if they're taking Dulcich fairly early. But also someone like Jeremy Ruckert for the Jets. I wanted to believe Kenny Yeboah, a UDFA last year, was going to be the answer for the Jets or Tyler Kroft, and it wasn't, but they might have answered that now. Cade Otton. We don't know if Gronk's coming back. That could be a great one there. The only ones I don't like is the two that went to Baltimore, Isaiah Likely and then Charlie Collier. I like both of them, but I didn't want to see either of them sit behind Mark Andrews for a few years. And overall, yeah, I really like the tight end class, but I got one specifically in mind that I'll dive into more, but who's your tight end?
So before I get into my tight end, I know you mentioned some of the ones. The one I want to mention is, and I didn't necessarily like it at the beginning, but more and more I look at it and listen to a couple pods. The Jeremy Ruckert to the New York Jets is a very interesting one to me. I think I wasn't high on Ruckert because he didn't have a lot of production in college. But when you look at it, there's a reason he didn't have a lot of production in college. It's called Garrett Wilson. It's called Chris Olave. It's called Jameson Williams last year. It's called Jackson Smith-Njigba. It's called Marvin Harrison Jr. There's a reason.
Travion Henderson.
Yeah, Travion Henderson. There wasn't, even though CJ Stroud is a good quarterback and they throw the ball, the outside targets were so good that I believe that is why he didn't, looking back on it, he didn't have as good of a season. Going to my guy, I am going to talk about Trey McBride, who was the number one tight end, surprisingly out of Colorado State, not a Power 5 conference. In his senior, what's crazy is he didn't have great production his freshman, sophomore, junior year. His best year in his first 3 years of college was his sophomore year. He had 45 catches, 560 yards, and 4 touchdowns. But let's skip to his senior year. At a small school, yes, he had a lot of target share, but he had 90 In 12 games, he had 90 catches, 1,121 yards. Yes, he only had one touchdown. But that is, to me, could also be because the school's not that great. They didn't have a great record. 90 catches and 1,100 yards from a tight end you in any team is good stats. Here's the problem, Zach. He went to a team in Arizona that already has Zach Ertz and Max Williams. I'm not saying Max Williams is good. I'm saying he's a good blocker. McBride can block and pass catch. Ertz is getting older, but they did just re-sign him to a multi-year contract. We know about, maybe it changes a little bit because now we know that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be out. Maybe they can play him and Ertz on the field at the same time for a few games. The reason I like McBride, and I still have him as my number one tight end, I just wish the landing spot was a little bit better. Like if that landing spot was the Jets, or if that landing spot was like a team that doesn't have a tight end, like let's say, for instance, could you imagine him being drafted by the Chargers? I know I'm a Chiefs fan, but could you imagine him being on a team that's got, a Herbert? Or here's another one, because he did go later, so all 32 teams did pass on him. I thought he could have gone to Cincinnati.
Ooh, I would have liked that. Even if he's going to be a backup somewhere, I was looking at the Kelsey successor. Obviously, those are big footsteps to follow in, but if they could have gotten him at where he had gone, I wouldn't have hated that. Kelsey's getting older, and if he
would have been perfect, he would have been perfect for the Tampa Bay situation, where if Gronk comes in, you play behind Gronk, but if Gronk doesn't come in, you have a good enough talent that might not have as big of a learning curve.
And I look at Zach Ertz, where he's had some injury issues. We've seen him banged up before. My biggest fear with him going to Arizona isn't the potential opportunity down the road. It's the head coach. When are they going to get a new one? Are they going to, make it further than they should in the playoffs, make a playoff run to the Super Bowl, and suddenly they extend them 5 years or something, and suddenly we're stuck with Kingsbury for way too long? And that's where my concern is with McBride. The talent's there, the potential's there. I think he can have a long career regardless, but to truly hit his stride in the NFL, he's going to need the right play calling and the right system around him, because we've seen tight ends just be neglected in certain systems before, regardless of how good they are. And I don't want to see that happen with him.
I completely agree. So let's go from a team that has a tight end in Zach Ertz in front of a rookie to a team that doesn't really have a tight end in front of a rookie. Go ahead.
Mo Alley Cox would fight a little bit there.
Yeah,
but
a little.
Mo Alley Cox, Zach Ertz, not really the same thing at all. But Jelani Woods, Virginia, he was in a high pass volume offense. He's a big body. He's 6'7", 260. So this is a big boy. But he went in the third round, 309. Indianapolis must have seen something they really liked. And, he was my tight end too, pre-draft. So I was high on him as well. I was happy to see a team like that invest in him. Obviously, I wanted to believe in Kylan Granson last year, the undersized tight end. And I was hoping that this could be his year to really shine more with Jack Doyle retiring. But clearly they said otherwise. I believe that Indianapolis also took another tight end later on, who I'm spacing out on right now. But Jelani Woods is someone I see that can be a very viable tight end. He's strong. He's not necessarily the best blocker, but I think, around a stacked offensive line like that, I think they might be able to teach him a trick or two to not completely suck in the blocking department. But in regards to Matt Ryan's there, I really like this offense. They have JT, they have this great O-line, their defense is sound, and guess what? Now they have an upgrade. Say what you want about Matt Ryan. I know some people are turned off after the past few years not going that well, but Atlanta just wasn't a good situation all the way around. He's finally got some protection. He's got a run-first offense. All he needs to do is manage the game. Anything more
Agreed.
than that is awesome. And he's got Michael Pittman as his wide receiver one. He's got Alec Pierce, another guy I absolutely love, Cincinnati guy. Think he'll be great. Big body, not necessarily the fastest, but someone who I think will be very respectable and have a long career. I put him and then Jelani Woods alongside. So if it's Pittman, Alec Pierce, Jelani Woods as the main receiving options, and then you've got JT. I think Matt Ryan can have a good fantasy year. I'm taking him in late in drafts just for like a backup QB. No one really seems to believe in him anymore. But then I'm looking at some of these weapons too. We've seen Matt Ryan utilize tight ends before. Obviously Kyle Pitts a little bit last year. It's tough to say because it was a bad situation over all the way around. But I mean, Gonzalez, who else was it? We had
Gonzalez. He's the one that got Austin Hooper the contract.
Austin Hooper, and then more recent Hayden Hurst. I mean, we've seen guys look respectable with him as the quarterback. He likes to use his tight ends. Tight ends are going to be on the field if it's a run-first offense. So I see plenty of opportunity there with Jelani Woods. And he's fallen fairly far in rookie drafts. I've seen him going, maybe at the end of the second, but more consistently in the third round of, unless it's, I guess that was a 14 or 6, only late second, 14 to 16 man leagues I'm in, but the 10 or 12, yeah, mid-third round. I think that's a great pickup there, especially in a very weak position. So Jelani Woods is someone that I'm trying to get in every league as well. I don't have to really invest a lot into it, and I think the opportunity will be there.
So all I have to add about Jelani Woods is I was talking about him if you weren't. So
I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah, where I didn't have him at 2 going into the draft, but I love the landing spot. The only thing I want to bring up about tight ends before we go to the next section is one notable undrafted tight end was Jalen Weidermeyer out of Texas A&M. I don't understand how he went undrafted, but the fact that he got signed by the Buffalo Bills is very intriguing to me. Am I saying that he's going to knock Dawson Knox off his pedestal? Absolutely not. Don't come at me. Don't at me on Twitter and say that I'm saying he's going to knock off Dawson Knox. But Buffalo does like to use the 2 tight end set. Yes, they did sign O.J. Howard, but it's O.J. Howard. Could Weidermeyer be the future tight end 2 for Buffalo? Abso-freaking-lutely, but he has something to prove because he would have been drafted somewhere late in the draft as a flyer if there wasn't enough red flags.
And I completely agree. It's an interesting fit for Weidermeyer in Buffalo, but it's also interesting because this was a guy that was looked at to be competing with McBride for, the top tight end in this class at one point last season. The production was there in college. There are a lot of reasons to be excited. And then as the college football season comes to an end, the workouts begin, the combine happens. This man skyrocketed, not even drafted. He went from one of the highest ones in the class for that position to irrelevant in regards to draft equity. I think it's a good pickup. But in regards to, getting him there as a UDFA, there's no expectations. Also, if he's going to have a successful career, there's no better start than having a chip on your shoulder like this, where you think your talent's up here and you get completely disregarded by every team. No one drafts you. You mentioned this with someone earlier. All 32 teams had a chance. All 32 teams had a chance plenty of times, and they just said, no, thank you. And, Jeff, I know you're asking about Cole Turner. That's another one that I like. I mean, obviously, there's some questions about the opportunity with some of those other guys there right now, but Cole Turner had an excellent career at Nevada. He had a quarterback that was Carson Strong, another guy that just plummeted down the boards. And, now he's with Philly as a UDFA. But Cole Turner is, I think, another guy where you question what can be there in year one, year two for production in regards to fantasy, but long terms they have the tools in place to really progress into a successful career in the NFL where they're a 8-12 career guy.
Yeah. What's going on, Jeff? Thanks for tuning in. I do agree with Zach. Yes, they got Logan Thomas. He got injured last year. They just have bodies. They don't have a top end talent. They got Turner late enough that they could develop him. We all know, just like any tight end, even a guy like Cole Kmet, who everyone thought was going to be this stud tight end, they take time to produce. I'm just saying they take time to
Okay.
produce.
I was going to say, don't hurt my feelings about Cole.
No, that's all I mean. All I mean is tight ends sometimes take time to produce. I do think Cole Turner is going to be one of those guys that takes time to produce. I also think, I know we didn't get too far into it, but I also think that the quarterback that Washington drafted in the 5th round, Sam Howell, could be the starter in 2023, possibly. So in the future, I think that the future could be bright for Cole Turner. It's just not going to be this year. If you can get him at the very end of a draft or even after the draft and stash him on your taxi squad, that's what I'm probably going to try to do that. He is on my late target list. But other than that, I think we are done with the tight end talk. So one reminder to everyone watching, please go to the YouTube channel, Going for Two Live. Please click on the like button, the thumbs up. Give us that thumbs up. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That's the best way you can help us out. So to wrap up the show, we are both going to give you someone that we like that was drafted towards the end of the draft that you can maybe stash on a taxi squad or maybe even put on your normal roster, depending on the situation. Zach, why don't you start off?
So I know we just said we were done with the tight end talk, but I'm going to get a little bit of a deep sleeper type of guy. Jake Ferguson, tight end out of Wisconsin. You know, I was reading a lot of mock drafts, articles, reports, pre-draft saying he's a guy that could be going 6th or 7th round. Well, he ended up going in the 4th to Dallas, to a team where Schultz, he's a free agent next year. And while the opportunity might not be too much this year, I could see him being another unathletic white guy tight end that gets the opportunity next year if they're not wanting to pay Schultz or if they have all these other Wisconsin tight end No, they don't necessarily have a lot of money to be giving to Schultz, and depending on how he produces this year and what his demands are next year, they might just have to cut him free anyway. But I like Jake. I've watched him at Wisconsin as a Badger fan for a few years. The unfortunate part is he's not the most athletic guy, but he's a good receiving option. He blocks fairly well, and he didn't have a quarterback whatsoever. Every time I believed Wisconsin would have a quarterback, the guys throwing him the ball were nothing worthwhile. I mean, Jack Cohn was probably the best one, and he's another guy in this draft class that became a UDFA. But I look at Jake Ferguson as a high upside guy that, you know, if you're in a 10-12 man league, he may not even get drafted, or that's a 4th round pick. And at that point, you're really just throwing darts at the wall anyway, and that's a guy that I think you could actually really get some sort of something in regards to sticking in the NFL and potentially producing on your fantasy team in years to come. Who's your sleeper, Mike?
So mine is not. So here we go. Just like I had Jerome Ford, very mad and plummeting down my, spectrum and ranks of the running backs and not happy. The running back that I like got a tick up because of what happened today in the fact that the Atlanta Falcons cut Mike Davis. Tyler Algier, 5th round running back out of BYU. I mean, here we go. In his last 2 seasons, his junior year, he ran 150 attempts for 1,130 yards, 13 touchdowns. 2021, I know this is on on College Reference. It says that he had 1,600 yards on 276 attempts. This says he had 23 touchdowns. I don't know if that's accurate, but all I'm saying, I was mainly more looking at the yards. I know it was 1,600 yards. Tyler Algier, I believe, yes, they have Cordero Patterson. I believe that he will be the starter sooner than later. I'm not saying necessarily this year, but I do believe that he will be the future starter for the Atlanta Falcons. We have been saying that the Atlanta Falcons should have taken a running back for like the last 2 or 3 years. We thought they were going to take a running back last year. They didn't take one. Then we thought they could take one higher this year, and then they re-signed Cordero Patterson. We knew they – I think we could both say that we knew they weren't going to take Brees Hall or whatever just because how much they gave into Patterson. But drafting a guy like Algier in the 5th round who has the talent and the capability, and right now you got Mariota who isn't going to go out and win you. Like, he's not going to go out and throw for, he's not going to do what Jameis Winston or some of these gunslingers can do and throw 40 times for 350 yards a game and 40 touchdowns in a year. If he does that, it's because they're in trouble and they're 1-15 and he's just slinging the ball. He's going to hand the ball off. He's going to throw the ball to Drake London. He's going to throw the ball to Kyle Pitts because that's really all they got. I mean, me and you could probably go out there and be the 4th wide receiver, and that's not a good thing.
If they need a third guy that's 6'4" or taller out there, I got him.
Yeah,
I'm not as fast as any of those guys though, so I'll just kind of stand there.
So I mean, that's not a good thing. But I think Tyler Algier could be that running back and that heavy hitting running back that they've been looking for a couple years now. What do you think about Tyler?
I think it was a great pick. I mean, to me, it reminds me of a Aaron Jones type situation, a smaller school where it's not necessarily as flashy or accredited in regards to, this big powerhouse running back school. It's not a Wisconsin or an Alabama or one of these RBU type situations where you're looking at their numbers and you're like, oh, I have to get this guy now. No, it was BYU, and they had Zach Wilson as well. So I think this is great slot value for a guy or for a position that they should have addressed, because it's hard to expect what we got from Cordero last year to repeat. I think while it was great and fun to watch, we saw it kind of skid towards the end of the season. It was a hot, exciting few weeks towards the beginning of the season, but as we got into the later parts, that production really wasn't there the same from Cordero anymore. So I think it's good. And, some of us, or some drafts already happened, some of those rookie drafts were right after that draft ended, maybe on Sunday, where Mike Davis wasn't cut yet. So Tyler Algier was falling a little later. I was trying to snag him in those. I'm watching his ADP slowly creep up now that Mike Davis has been cut. But any concerns you had, I think, shouldn't be there in regards to lack of opportunity. When Mike Davis was there as well, I wasn't too concerned, but just 2 vets, you can kind of convince yourself that the reps won't necessarily be there right away. But on a losing team with an older running back like Cordero, you have to assume that they're going to try and get creative with who they're using, how they're using them. So volume for someone like Algier should be there. I definitely would recommend a guy like that. And, the mid-second round, if you need a running back and you didn't get, a Brees Hall or a Kenneth Walker at the top of the draft, guys like Algier, guys like, who was the other one that went to Houston?
Dameon Pierce.
Thank you, Dameon Pierce, yeah. Like the guys like that, where you can get them at a decent price in the second, and you might be able to cash in quick on the upside. But no, I'm really high on Algier in regards to what I could potentially get for the price.
Awesome. So that was our show, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We are the Fantasy Cheat Sheet from Going for Two Live Network. Let's go to sign-offs. Zach, tell us where we can find you and what you got going on.
You can find me on Twitter at @TheBigPulowski. Not too much to plug as of right now, but we will be doing this again every other Tuesday. And, we'll be back here soon. What about you, Mike? What do you got to plug?
So you can find me at Drop the Mic FF. You can find me on Going for Two, obviously, on the website. I also am a co-host over at the Rum Boys Fantasy Network. You can find me there every so often. But just like Zach said, we will be here in 2 weeks on Tuesday at 6:30 West Coast, 9:30 East Coast. Come find us. Have a great night, everyone. Have a good evening.
See ya.